if you look at Danielle, I mentioned earlier how she's something like 8% black, maybe 11% Indian, a few percent Creole. She's about maybe 30 to 35% non-white, if you will. And if you go with the 50% Italian, that would have been considered non-white a century or more ago. At what point, though, from that 30% minority to someone like Jared Taylor, would he say that, let's say if he was her age, he would find her sexual? He probably, at his age, if he's not gay, he probably thinks she's a nice, attractive young woman. At what point is it at 30%? If she was, would she be more attractive if she was only 12% non-white? If she's 40% non-white, would she be less attractive or more attractive? I mean, at what point does this kind of thing kick in? And this is why I later on we're going to take a look at some attractive black celebrity females because it's all bullshit. Because especially when it comes to sexuality, white men have never had any problem wanting to get in the pants or up the skirts of black women who they found attractive, and so when we talk about sexuality and race, race tends to, when you got a heart on you and someone's got a nice hole you want to plug up, you don't give a damn about race. And we'll talk a bit more about with others. But like I said, at what point, if we don't have these filters like the Terminator robot that can say, oh, be 17.3% non-white female, okay to interbreed with or something. We don't have that kind of a thing. And even if we did, it would be kind of silly to do that. So the whole thing about that I just find so ridiculous, and it's
hilarious. Like if he would have gotten this invitation to be on this show from her, he would have just taken a look at her and her last name and just said, yeah, Italian. In the same way that, again, like, growing up in Brooklyn, it would be like, I know that type. I know that type. I would never think, oh, she's partly black or she's partly Indian or she's partly anything. I would just think, yeah, an Italian of the darker skinned variety, right? Like he's here saying this, that he finds it fascinating that people can't tell the difference. He can't fucking tell the difference probably until he heard this information from her.
For the dean of students at a university, and somebody from the Black Student Union walked in and said, we'd like to have a graduation ceremony just for black people. And that's very common in universities. Nobody would say, well, really? How are you going to figure out who's black? Nobody would dare say that. The campus probably burned down. So this is a question that, for the most part, is asked only of white people. If there's an Asian student union, or Hispanics have some sort of clubhouse on campus, or if there is a firefighters association that's for black people.
White people have it all. The major donors to universities are going to be the Bill Gateses of the world, are going to be the Warren Buffetts of the world. It's not, you're not getting, P. Diddy, setting up courses or, backing historically black colleges. And maybe he does, and good for him if he does. But my point in general is the few wealthy black people who can afford to do that probably aren't doing that. And so that's why when you hold all the levers of power, you can't blame those who are out of power from wanting to have their own enclaves. But you don't need an enclave when you have 95% of the power. I wanted to go through because you had mentioned how there are mathematical golden ratios and stuff that determine sexual attractiveness. Now, of course, there are going to be people who are foot fetishists, and there are people who are going to be fetishists for that. They like someone's ears a certain way or whatever. But putting that aside, your average male, heterosexual male, is going to look at your average heterosexual female of any color, any racial group, and going to be drawn to the symmetry, facial symmetry, bone structure, figure 8, long legs, buttocks, etc. So this first picture is a group of 5 young female athletes from Ethiopia, I believe. I forget, what does it say? I can't read it.
Ethiopian.
So they are track and field athletes. Now you look at them; they're obviously in good shape. You look at them; they're clearly sisters. Pick out the one, for me, the one in the upper left-hand corner, or the one in the bottom right-hand corner. I would say those are the 2 most beautiful. But these are all women that, on a scale of 1 to 100, any man is going to say they were probably about a 95. The ugliest one is a 95 out of 100. You know, these are clearly physically attractive females. I would say to Jared Taylor or anyone else that you're telling me that if you were 25 or 30 years old in that age range of these women, and one of them came up to you and showed interest, you would not reciprocate? I don't believe that for a second. And you can even see probably they may not be mixed race, but then again, if they're from Ethiopia, there could be some white blood in them from Anglo settlement or whatnot. But most of the other photos of black women that I sent you are of mixed race, and they go back, you know, to the earliest part of Hollywood. So I don't know if you want to go to the Dorothy Dandridge photo next.
Well, just a comment. I asked you before the show, like, oh, did Jared Taylor actually like say anything negative about, you know, the appearances of other races? Because you know, the kind of like modern thing that white supremacists do is, you know, they do that thing where like, no, I think everybody's equally beautiful. I just think everybody needs to stick with their own kind, right? That's the new like politically correct way of dealing with it. But in fact, going back to the Phil Donahue thing, he did say like ugly Haitians and ugly Mexicans. So he clearly does have these kinds of like racial hangups and, you know, just
And I would say to him, you know, if I was single and 25 years old and any of these young women came up to me, I would be thrilled to have their attention. Whether I'd have anything in common with them since they're athletes, and I'm not, I doubt it. But you can't tell me that your average white guy, your average Chinese guy, you could find some Maori tribesman from New Zealand, and he's going to say those are beautiful women.
yeah.
So, but go if you can pull up the Dorothy Dandridge. Okay, so this is Dorothy Dandridge. For those who don't know, Dorothy Dandridge was probably the biggest black film star of the first half of the 20th century. She was the dancer, most notably a singer. She also did acting. She is probably the closest that you could say to a black Judy Garland, except she was more explicitly sexual. Now you can just see from this photo, and there are a lot more Google Dorothy Dandridge, Google her, and you'll find her in a lot more sexy poses. I didn't want to get Alex in trouble with some of these, but you can see she has a nice buttocks. You can see she has a nice figure eight. Just look at those features. Now I believe I believe she had white heritage, and you can see some of the cheekbones there. You can see that she clearly has probably some European ancestry there. But again, tell me any guy who would say this is not an attractive woman, and I'm not a black female fetishist or whatnot, you know. But that is clearly an attractive woman, and she was a star of what were called race films, and a lot of people have made the note that race films were popular among white men. These were probably the forerunners of what's today called incels. These were probably white guys who couldn't get laid, who'd go to race films and probably then go home afterwards, or maybe even in the theaters, whack off to seeing Dorothy Dandridge in a slinky costume, because oftentimes she was cast as non-black. She would be cast as an Egyptian or some some dancer, some gypsy kind of dancer. Although most of her films, she was cast in black roles. Now, Bernadette Stanis was sort of the Halle before Halle in the 1970s. She starred in Good Times, a CBS show with, you probably have seen it, J.J. Walker, Kid Dynamite, if you ever saw the 1970s sitcoms. That was a Norman Lear show. Now, you look at her again. This is probably from the late 70s or whatnot. The character of JJ, played by Jimmy Walker, would always make fun of her, call her the ugly sister, which was, in fact, she's drop dead gorgeous there. Again, look at the figure eight there. Look at just in her yoga pants, I guess they are. Look at the toneness there. And again, you can find much more explicit versions of her in bikinis and whatnot online. Again, you can see. Look at the bone structure in her face. I mean, this is objectively a gorgeous woman, and you can look at her. I think she's like 68, 69 now. She's still a very attractive older woman too. But here she is 50 years ago, and I don't see how anyone could argue that this is not a physically attractive female. Okay, so this is Diahann Carroll. Now, Diahann Carroll goes back to the 1960s. She was the first Black woman to ever have a television show be the star of it, a show called Julia. I believe it was on ABC in the late 60s. She later, then in the 1980s, became famous again on Dynasty, playing the sister of the lead character, a white guy. She was the Black forbidden child there. Now, this is from the 1960s. You can see she's got that kind of with the afro there. Again, you can look you can look at the figure 8. You can look at the bone structure. And here she most photos you'll find of her, she'll have her hair straightened out. But here she's definitely doing the Black thing. This is probably, if I were to guess, the first 2 or 3 years of the 70s. And so, yeah, so Diahann Carroll, again, what guy, wouldn't want to tap that if they had the opportunity, and, so again.
Jared Taylor is a goddamn liar, man.
Now, this is Dona Drake. Now, the interesting thing about Dona, and it's Dona, it's not Donna Drake, it's Dona, Dona Drake. Her real name was something like Ellie Mae, something or other. Now you can clearly see here that she's probably half Black, half white. I believe, and I could be wrong, she might have been the product of incest or rape or something. I'm not certain. A lot of now she also starred in some race films, but unlike Dorothy Dandridge, because she's a bit lighter skinned and because her hair is made lighter, and you can see she's got the lighter skin, she mostly played Arabs, or she played South American women. She'd often do those roles. She was a singer. She was a dancer. She was not nearly as famous as Dorothy Dandridge, but she passed. She was one of the Black actresses that passed. Dorothy Dandridge, as I said, did 98% race films. She moved beyond race films, but she never got past B films. She was never, she wasn't co-starring with John Wayne or with, Gary Cooper or whatnot. But again, that's again, and I mean, look at her. She's a gorgeous woman. Here's the modern Halle Berry. Halle Berry has a white mother, I believe, and a Black father. So this is, I don't know where that's from. This might be from Playboy, maybe not Playboy, maybe. But again, Halle Berry is for the last 25 years or so, she's been probably the leading sex symbol in Hollywood. And, again, like I said with my friend, Halle Berry transcends race, because even someone who is aware of race, like my friend, it's Halle Berry. Okay, so this is a South African supermodel who's half Black, half white. Her name's Nicole Meyer. I know her because on the Sports Illustrated website, they have a thing called Lovely Lady of the Day, and she was one of them. And I think she was also on the cover of the South African Sports Illustrated. Now, again, there's far racier ones here, but again, you may not like the fact that she's got that ultra thin supermodel kind of view, but again, you can see she's clearly in good shape. She's got again, very symmetrical features, and again, I don't know what more there is to say. Maybe that
I mean, we're just distinguishing essentially, objective beauty from
and this is a playmate. I forget her name, but she's a playmate, so you can look. She's half Swedish and half Ethiopian, I believe. Ida Ljungquvist, that's her name. So again, even without her naked in Playboy, you can just see how well endowed she is as a female.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there's a difference between objective assessments of beauty versus whatever you might say about like personal preferences, right? And it's one of those things where Jared Taylor is somebody who he's gonna be the type that says, I'm making judgments based on objective judgments, and I'm making decisions based on objective judgments. And yet, a lot of it will come down to like, if he does not want to intermix, it's gonna be all about that sort of like personal feeling about her, right? The rejection of intermixing has nothing to do with objective beauty, and he sort of like gives it away by using phrases and then denying them, but still uses phrases like ugly Haitians. Whatever else is going on with him, it's just a personal thing. It's not objective, rational decision making, right? Which is exactly what he purports to be doing.
That's a gal named Kylie Johnson. Now she's a Playboy playmate that was also one of these lovely ladies of the day. And you can find her on, again, you can tell she's also probably got some white in her too. She's not particularly dark skinned, and again, now she's the most modern looking with the tattoos and whatnot. But whether it's for her going back to Dorothy Dandridge, I mean, in what reality, I don't know how anyone could argue that these are not objectively beautiful women. You may find one of them like this might be too slutty a pose for you, or Dorothy Dandridge might be too reserved for you, or whatnot, or the supermodel from South Africa might have too small a breast for your taste. But the point, generally speaking, is like any other group, whether it's all white women, you could get everyone from Marilyn Monroe to Julia Roberts to Nicole Kidman or whatnot, and you could do the same thing. Every guy who's a heterosexual is going to find this female sexually attractive, and even some gay guys would have to admit, just in terms of beauty, oh God, she's wonderful or whatnot. So if that's the case, and if there's objectively ways to look at these women and say these are women that I wouldn't mind having sex with if I had a freebie, everything else falls apart. Because if you're willing to get in a copulative act to potentially reproduce with these people, how can you say that they're not humans? How can you say that they're somehow lesser than you if you're willing to be physically intimate with these women, even if it's just based upon lust? It makes no sense ideologically, it makes no sense scientifically, and it makes no sense sexually.
Yeah. Although again, like the types the modern white supremacists would say, I have nothing against them or their beauty or whatever. We just need to stick, with one another. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, of course. Right. Even if there's like a denial there.
So most of these women, as I said, have mixed black and white. Let's take Halle Berry, because we probably know she's half white, half black. Danielle Romero said she was like 10% black or whatever it was. So between 10% and 50% of Halle Berry, at what point does a Halle Berry, if she was to get closer to the percentage that Danielle has, when would she become acceptable to not just fuck, but to marry, let's say? Does Halle, if she gets down to 40%, does that mean that she's worthy of being my mistress or my wife or whatnot? Is it 33%, 1/3, 30%? Quarter, 25%. At what point does that become viable? But I bring that up because no guy thinks like that. You don't think like that. You think with your dick. You see that golden ratio of Halle Berry's body there, and you want to fucking stuff her. That's just the reality of things. So all of the rest of that just becomes bullshit. That becomes hyper overthought rationales.
What a sweet and yet raunchy and yet respectful conversation, right? I don't think there's anything been like this on YouTube thus far, right? Usually it starts going off into all kinds of nasty directions, but we pulled it off quite well. So yeah, I guess now we're gonna get to the next person on our list. 3.5 hours later, almost, Thomas Sowell.